The combat overall is actually really good. It flows really well, it's very energetic, and it does encourage careful placement of your characters. Honestly, I only have two real problems with the gameplay of this game. The first is that the control scheme is kind of terrible on PC. It's tolerable and you can certainly get used to it, but if you have the option, I would strongly recommend you use a gamepad for this game. Otherwise, you'll just have to get used to it. And don't get me wrong, you can, but it's not the best port I've ever seen in that regard. The second problem, however, is far, far more irritating. This game's save system sucks.
This is one of the game's save stations, and while in a dungeon, this is the only place that you are allowed to save. The problem with that is that not all dungeons have them, and they are often placed very, very poorly. This is exceptionally annoying during boss fights.
You cannot save prior to a boss fight, and if there are two in a row, as quite often happens, you can end up losing an awful lot of progress. The worst example of this that happened to me was when I died during a boss fight and lost over an hour of gameplay. That is frankly really, really infuriating. But with that said, the rest of the gameplay is pretty damn solid, and overall, it is fun to play, and I can't really complain about it too much. It's fairly standard JRPG stuff, but it's well implemented and it's enjoyable. So overall, pretty good job on the gameplay. I said before that this game has one of the most meta plots I have ever seen. I was not kidding. HyperDimension Neptunia is set in the world of game industry, where there are 4 lands, each of which is protected by one of the 4 CPUs. Well, I'll give them points for originality. The game follows Neptune, the CPU of Plenitude, who begins the game with amnesia. And now I am taking those points for originality right back. Fair dues, though in all honesty this game doesn't so much use cliches as wear them on its head as a hat, while shouting, "Look at me, I'm wearing a cliche on my head as a hat." The fourth wall doesn't so much get broken here as smashed to bits with sledgehammers, burned to the ground, and then nuked from orbit just to be sure. Well, that seems thorough. Yeah, this game uses a hell of a lot of fourth wall humour and meta jokes, and if you're not into that kind of thing, it'll get annoying quickly. I, however, am into that kind of thing, and as a result, I found this game really quite funny on occasion. As I mentioned before, Neptune has amnesia, and the reason for this is that she impacted the ground at a speed normally reserved for meteorites. She awakened shortly afterwards to find herself in the care of Compa, the nurse with the world's largest syringe. That is either one of the oddest innuendos I have ever heard, or this game is very, very bizarre. Yeah, this game is most definitely bizarre. The two characters quickly become friends, and they set out into the world in an attempt to recover Neptune's memories, fight some monsters, and attempt to satiate Neptune's crippling addiction to pudding. Along the way, they meet up and team up with a number of other characters, including the other CPUs, the ladies Whiteheart, Blackheart, and Greenheart. Which would make Neptune Lady Purpleheart. In fine anime tradition, each of the ladies can switch between 2 forms, that of a normal girl and that of their goddess form, which gives them ridiculously large weapons with which to fight ridiculously large monsters. Ultimately, the group decides that they'll travel the land and fight some monsters, because that's what you do in a video game, after all. You were not kidding about the meta nature of the narrative, then? Not in the least. Along the way, they run into more allies and discover something that threatens to unbalance game industry as a whole. And unfortunately, that's where we meet one of the story's weak links, because the villain has the classic problem of most JRPG villains. You fight him too often. Her, actually, but yeah. She turns up a lot, and then you fight her, and then she runs away. And after a while, she just stops becoming any kind of serious threat. If it wasn't for the fact that the game later chooses to hang a lampshade on it, I'd probably get quite annoyed about it. But as it stands, it instead turns it into a joke, and, well, honestly, it's a joke that kind of works. Ultimately, this game is quite amusing, and that definitely works to its favour. And it is most definitely well written, although the dialogue can get a little exposition heavy on occasion. Sadly, it is one of the most common issues that affects games that try to establish a suitably large feeling world. Yeah, but there are ways round it if you're sufficiently sneaky. Ultimately, this game's story definitely has its flaws, but honestly, I'm willing to let it get away with a lot of them for the simple reason that it's fun. I'm always willing to let something that's knowingly a bit goofy get away with more than something that's trying to be really, really grim and serious all the time. And as a result, the only question that really matters is, do the jokes make you laugh? Because if that's the case, then they're doing their job. And do they? Yeah, they do. Bad comedy is one of the worst things to sit through, as any fan of this show will know. But as a result, when it does land a successful joke, it really works. And the whole game just has this wonderful, goofy energy about it that, frankly, is really refreshing to see. Because at the end of the day, I've played games that are dark and serious, and frankly, it's really nice to find one that's just having fun with itself in amongst all the kidnapped daughters and murdered wives. The art is pure anime, which frankly I suspect was done completely on purpose. In fact, I believe there's actually an anime adaptation of this game. Regardless, as I've said in the past, the anime style doesn't do a lot for me, especially in the way that it draws people. With that said, though, this game has some really fantastic monster designs, especially in a lot of the really weird variety of things that it comes up with. Even if later in the game you'll start seeing enemies that are just reskins of earlier ones. Overall, I like the art. It's certainly not perfect, and honestly, it's not really to my taste, but it's cute and enjoyable enough that it can get through even my cynicism. The graphics are one of the areas where this game shows its roots. The Rebirth version was, after all, designed to run on the PlayStation Vita, and as a result, the graphics are noticeably not that good. Especially some of the combat character models are noticeably pixely at times, and overall, there's just not a lot of depth and really good texture work. With that said, though, I don't think the graphics really detract from the experience much. There's more stuff I could want, high resolution textures, lip syncing whenever they talk during combat, but at the end of the day, the complaints I have are more nitpicky than anything else. The graphics are definitely this game's weakest component, but I don't think they drag down the experience too much. The voice acting for this game is slightly odd to talk about, largely because it's very intermittent. Only about a third to half of the actual dialogue appears to have been voiced, and there seems to be very little rhyme or reason to what is and isn't voiced. It's not main quests are voiced and side quests aren't, or anything like that. It just seems to have been picked completely at random. Which is very much a pity, because for the most part the voice work's actually pretty good, especially on the four ladies, who use different voices for their normal form and for their goddess form, and they're sufficiently qualified voice actresses that I couldn't tell if it was the same actress or not. As for the rest of the audio, the music is pretty good. It's got a few nice tracks, though again, a little bit more variety would have been nice. The sound effects are perfectly fine. There's none that I could point to and complain about, so at the end of the day I think we should just call it a win. Overall, the audio is actually pretty good. I just wish there was more of it. So, did I enjoy HyperDimension Neptunia Re Birth 1? Yes, I did. Should you buy it? While I certainly enjoyed this game, and I will be completing the Let's Play when I have the time, I'm not entirely convinced it justifies its 23 quid price point. I was lucky enough to pick it up in a 60% off sale, and frankly for that, I definitely got my money's worth. As such, I think we can put this in the old recommend, but not necessarily at full price folder. Stick it on your wish list, and keep an eye on it. If you can get it for under 15 quid, it's probably worth it. If you can get it for under 10, you're getting a damn good deal. Now, if you'll excuse me, before you skedaddle, could I have a word? Sure. Now, if you'll excuse me, it appears that he wants a bit of a chat. I'll see you later. Richard, I've been wondering something. Shoot. You remember your encounter with Shah? Well, it's kind of difficult to forget fights to the death, so yeah. Well, it's just... I've been thinking, have you considered what he wanted? Honestly, I've been trying not to think about it. Why? It's just... I've been talking to our mutual friends, and they feel like it might be worth looking into. Oh yes, because I'm real eager to hear what a bunch of dicks will send me into a life and death fight without the decency to talk to me themselves have to say. Well, yes, I appreciate that your relationship with them has been, well, far from cordial to say the least, but you cannot deny that their information has always been accurate in the past. In a purely technical sense of the word, I suppose. All right, what do they want? Well, given Shah's MO, we know that he was on Earth for the purposes of killing someone. Does it not seem logical to find out who and why? And how exactly would we do that? Well, given Shah's extremely brief window of opportunity, it makes sense that whoever he was targeting must have been close to that park on that day. It seems like a logical place for me to start. You to start? Yes. Well, for your duel, I sat on the sidelines. I stayed here and I couldn't do anything to help. Frankly, I'm unwilling to do that again. So I will help however I can. I'll see you in a few hours. All right. And, Martin, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Given our history, I'm inclined to assume that this will not end particularly smoothly. I'll see you when I get back.